Okay, there we go. And as soon as I finish this and get the recording back, I send the recording out to the offices so that if you wish to use this and go over it again, it'll be there for you. Somewhere within your office systems as well, they have this copy of the exclusive right of sale listing agreement. And you can see on here that I've made some notes in red so that you can actually use this as a cheat sheet before getting ready to write your own exclusive right of sale listing agreement. So I'm going to start by explaining to you every contract that comes from the state. You will see down here on the bottom left-hand corner that there is a number and a date. I am talking about the ERS-21tn. ERS is exclusive right of sale. 21 is the version, and TN is the transition to transaction brokerage.
They might record this.
Okay. I am a huge advocate of single agency and believe that's how you should be operating and conducting yourself in real estate. But built into that is the transition to transaction brokerage. We'll go over that in more detail when we get to that part. Okay. Now, I'm going to start by exclusive right of sale listing agreement. Be very careful that this is the agreement that you are using. Every once in a while, I pick up that an agent has gone into Form Simplicity, wherever they're getting their documents from, and they're choosing the wrong listing agreement. The most common one you're using is exclusive right of brokerage. Big mistake. Make sure you're always using the right agreement. Exclusive right of brokerage, for the most part, is similar to this, but there is one major difference that can cost you and has cost one of our agents a lot of money. It says that the seller can sell the property on their own and you don't get paid a commission. Okay? You don't want to give the owner that out. So just start by using the right documentation. Okay? All right. If you have any questions, rather than putting your question into the chat, which I really don't pay attention to when I'm talking, just take yourself off mute and ask the question. I'm okay with being interrupted to help asking or answering questions for you. All right, so line 2 on this is the seller. And you can see I wrote in there, it's from the tax records. So you get a call, you're getting ready to go on a listing appointment. The first thing you're going to do is go to the county tax department and you're going to pull the records on the property, right? The first thing you want to make sure of is who are you going to meet with, right? If the tax record says John Smith and Mary Smith, husband and wife, you want to meet with both of them because they're both going to have to sign the listing agreement. If it says 123 Main Street, LLC, you know you're dealing with a corporation. Question is, who has the right to sign on behalf of a corporation? The only way to know that is to look at the operating agreement for the LLC. Same thing applies if it's a trust, mind you. So if it's the, Richard Bass Living Trust, chances are that I'm going to be signing for my own trust. But if you were to get a phone call one day from my son and said, listen, we just committed my dad, I'm taking care of selling all of his real estate, does my son have the right to do that? You don't know until you see the documentation that gives that authority to that individual. Understand a corporation, of which a trust is a type of corporation, cannot sign a document. Those are inanimate objects. There is always somebody signing on behalf of the corporation or the trust. So if it was a corporation, it could be Richard Bass, president, 123 Main Street, LLC. If it's a trust and there's somebody other than the trustee, it would be Richard Bass trustee for Richard Bass Living Trust. You understand that? Now, to get the documentation that you need to verify it, you're going to blame the title company. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, when we go under contract, the title company is going to need to see a copy of the operating agreement or the trust. Would it be possible for you to get me those documents now so that I have them in our file? Okay. Don't let it hold up taking the listing and starting to work on it, but you want to get those documents as soon as you can. Now, in two of our offices right now, we have Title Alliance. I can only speak for them. Susan and Adriana, who are fabulous in working with you. If, excuse me, if you ever have a question as to who the seller is and who should be signing the documents, reach out to them. They will be more than happy to do a quick search of the records for you and tell you who's signing and how it has to be signed. Okay? So I know Aventura, you've got Ariana in your office, and Boca and Boynton, you've got Performance Title right now. Use them to help you out with this stuff, okay? Line 3, the brokerage. That is the name of your office. So it could be Keller Williams Realty Boca Raton, Keller Williams Realty Professionals, Keller Williams Realty Consultants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is just the name of your office. It is not just Keller Williams. It's not Keller Williams Realty. And it is not Keller Williams Realty / your name. It says brokerage. That's the name of the office you're in. Wherever on any document you see it asking for brokerage, that's what you're putting in there. It's the name of your office. Okay? That's the legal part of the first two lines. Paragraph 1, the authority to sell the property. So the seller is giving us the exclusive right to sell the real and personal property. And it has two blank lines. One is the start date, the other is the termination date. You will always date it the date that you are there having these documents signed. All right? You don't ever want to be in a position of post-dating a listing agreement, especially with the ability to put something into the MLS now as a coming soon status. We've had a case in the past where somebody had said, well, my sellers aren't going to be ready for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They're doing blah, 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 blah. And guess what? The seller told a neighbor that they were getting the house ready to sell, and the neighbor's friend came in and bought the house. We didn't have a binding listing agreement because the agent had dated it down the road, and they went to contract before that came into play. So always date that the day you're there. Now, the expiration date, the termination date, that is totally up to you. You can put whatever you want in there. Now, you all should know when we do our weekly stats, you will always see more listings expire the last day of the month than any other day of the month. So a whole lot of agents, if you're taking a listing today, you're looking at 6 months from today, it's September, rather than dating it September 12th, which is just a random date, you're going to date it September 30th. If you get into the habit of dating all of your listing agreements at the end of the month, you're a lot less likely to forget that a listing is going to be expiring. And you'll know that come the 1st of September, you're going to be making the phone calls to those sellers and say, you know what, we've been on the market now for 5 months, time to look at taking another price reduction, time to do something that's going to get you under contract in the next 30 days. Okay? But that date, totally up to you. As I always joke, if somebody wants to give me a 30-day price, I'll give them a 30-day listing. Now, it's also very typical, commonplace, that if you have a high-end listing, which is ridiculous that it is, high-end listings like $1 million and plus, to take a 1-year listing agreement. It's not uncommon. Totally up to you what goes in there. Now, in regards to the termination date, have a trivia question for you. So today is March the 12th. You have a listing that expires the end of this month. You just got a contract on it last weekend, but it's not scheduled to close to the end of April. Do you need to have an extension signed on your listing agreement? I see Jimmy shaking his head no. Any other answers? All right. If you read the next line in the contract, it says, upon full execution of a contract for sale and purchase of the property, all rights and obligations of this agreement automatically extend through the actual closing date. So the answer is technically no, you do not have to have an extension signed. However, best practice, when you have your clients sign the contract, I would also have them sign an extension of the listing agreement, and I would put it for 30 days past when the contract is supposed to close. Now, why do I say best practice? Guys, you all know that there is a fairly substantial number of contracts that fall apart because of either inspection or appraisal issues. And if your contract falls apart after the termination date, you're SOL. You now lost the contract and you lost the listing. If you had them sign the extension, you've at least bought yourself another month or so to try and get another contract in place to get it to closing. So hopefully you haven't wasted all your time and effort and you're going to have a payday. Does that make sense to you? All right. Now, the rest of this paragraph, while it's literally 2 lines, is extremely important. This deals with the Fair Housing Act. It says this property will be offered to any person without regard to race, color, religion, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Kind of minor in the contract. And personally, I wish that they would do something like at least highlighting it, putting it in italics, make it stand out. This is important. Unfortunately, there are still a whole lot of very prejudiced people down here. And I used to refer to them as old-time Florida crackers, who will tell you at the listing appointment, I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. I love my neighbors, and I just really appreciate it if you don't bring any of, those green people to my house. If you are ever on an appointment and somebody comes close to saying that to you, you take your books, you close them up, and you say, thank you very much, but I'm sorry. I'm not the person to help you with the sale of your home. Good luck. Mm-hmm. They will backpedal. I'll guarantee you if that situation arises, they'll backpedal. No. I just wanted to put it out there. It's okay. Let's go. Do you ever think you're going to bring them an offer where their first question is not going to be, tell me about the buyers?
Yeah, true.
Don't cross the line, guys.
Yeah.
Now, the other reason that this is so important to you, be aware that HUD employs, call them mystery shoppers. Not only that, but we discovered a couple of years back, there is actually a group of, we found out they're vets out of the Orlando area who will sit there making phone calls to realtors to try and trip you up and get you to say something you shouldn't. Over the past 5 years, we've had, I believe, 2 lawsuits regarding that. Because they'll ask a question, you think it's an innocent answer, but it's crossed the Fair Housing Act. One of them was in regards to a rental. Now, your first line of response is, I don't know. Let me find out from my seller. And it's your seller that's answering the question, not you. But where they will usually start is, I saw your listing, on Zillow or whatever. Can you tell me something about it? Can you tell me about the neighborhood? Who lives in the neighborhood? They're trying to get you to say something they shouldn't. In regards to fair housing, guys, here's the easy way to remember it. You talk about the property, not who it applies to. Property has a huge backyard. Property has a resort style pool and yard. Has a magnificent family room. You don't want to tack on fabulous backyard for the kids and entertaining. Family room, great for family events and entertaining. Those cross the line. Talk about the features. The house is not within walking distance of synagogues or churches. It can be in close proximity to houses of worship and shopping. Subtle differences, guys, but it's all in the words. You understand that? All right. Now, paragraph 2, description of the property. Street address is easy. That's what you're driving up to. Tax records or the legal description. You can see I wrote in there right from the tax record. That's always very easy, very clean. It will be, Riverside, Plat A, Block B, Lot 14. Something that simple. In the very rare cases where it's an extremely lengthy legal description, you will check the box here that says see attachment, right? Attachment A. On the top of the tax record, you write attachment A, and the seller will initial that, and that actually becomes part of your listing agreement. Guys, it happens very, very rarely. Okay? Personal property, including appliance. You do not have to go into great detail here. You're going to put, refrigerator, range, dishwasher, built-in microwave, washer and dryer. Talk about the big items. Here's where this is important for you. You're on a listing appointment. You walk in, you put your books down, you say, "Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, why don't you show me through your house before we sit down and start talking? Talk to me about some of the features of your home. What did you like about it during the time you've lived here?" And you're taking notes as you're walking around. You're also noticing things. So when you're back at the table, Mrs. Seller, I noticed your chandelier in the dining room is very unusual, which is a polite way of saying it's really ugly. Are you planning on leaving that? And they might very well say, "Well, no, my in-laws gave that to us as a housewarming gift. We're taking it with us." Great. Here's what I found. When a buyer walks into your house and they fall in love with your house, they're probably falling in love with that as well. So rather than make it points of negotiation, why don't you and your husband go over to Lowe's or Home Depot this weekend, buy a chandelier that looks like it belongs, and let's switch it out now. You already know you're going to be taking that one with you. Does that make sense?
Wow.
As we walk through the bedroom, I noticed, your bedroom drapes match the bedspread. They're really unusual too. Are you planning on taking those? See, in the contracts about 2 years ago, the FAR/BAR contracts were now updated and they include drapes and all window treatments. People think because drapes are hanging on drape hooks or on a simple rod that they can take them with them. Not if it's in the contract. So you want to have that kind of conversation. We had an agent in Coral Springs 2 years ago. He ended up buying or crediting money to the buyers for new drapes because he never had that conversation with the seller. And when they packed up and moved, they packed up the drapes. So this is the time you want to have that kind of conversation with people. All right?
Richard, sorry.
Yes.
I think everyone's turned their mics off. That will be great because there are a lot of back noise and echoing. Thank you.
You got it. And I will put who I can find on mute. And let's see if we can take care of that. All right. Occupancy is or is not currently occupied by a tenant. Easy enough. If it's an investment property and there's a tenant in there, not only do you want to ask the question when the lease expires, but you want to get a copy of the lease. You need to verify all of the information. As if the lease, let's say the lease isn't up until the end of July, but you go to contract and the buyer wants to close on it, end of April or end of May, they've inherited that tenant. And you need to have all of that information ready to hand over. Unless they want to buy the property with the tenant in it. And even then, they still need to see the lease and get all the information about, what are the terms, what are they collecting rent, who's paying for what, and how much money is in last and escrow, last and security. Okay. All right. Price and terms. Price, easy enough. What you'd talk to the seller, what you've decided to list it for. Not in relations to the listing agreement, guys, but that is probably the single most important line on the entire contract. How you price the property. Okay? If you listen to the stats, if you look at the monthly stats that come out, and the new ones were just posted on Monday, you will see that approximately half of every listing that hits the market expires. And even with that many of them expiring, you still have 15 to 20% of your listings that are selling at or above list price. Guys, this is where your expertise comes in. This is where you've got to be able to ask the hard questions of the seller to find out what their motivation is to help you get their house sold. Pay attention to price. Okay. Now, the next line, 24. We don't deal with seller financing. You just ignore that line, and we don't deal with the assumption of existing mortgages. The vast majority of mortgages have a due upon sale clause built right into them. The only mortgage that does have an assumption ability are VA loans. And I have never met a vet that has allowed their loan to be assumed, because if they do, they lose that benefit going forward on the next house they're buying. So, guys, literally, you're going to put in the price. You're going to check cash conventional, VA and FHA if it applies. But the rest of this paragraph, you literally don't even have to address it with the seller. If you've got the personality that they want to read it line by line, I want you to understand what it's about. But I couldn't tell you the last time I have dealt with either of those issues in a contract. Okay, does that make sense for you? All right. Seller expenses. So those of you that have been in the business for a while, you know that every once in a while you'll find a buyer who wants the seller to pay 3% towards closing costs. Okay? Let them ask that on the contract. I don't believe that it should be put into the listing agreement. My attitude is, why would I ask the seller to commit to doing something now before somebody ever asks for it? So personally, I would put NA in there, not applicable. But this gives you the opportunity to have the conversation with the seller right up front. Say, I understand the reason that this line is in there. Let me explain it to you. There are certain buyers that might be very well qualified. They could have a 800 FICO score. They have a good job, but what they don't have is a lot of free cash. Or the cash they have, they're going to want to put into doing some renovations, updates, buying new furniture for the house. So it's not untypical for us to see buyers asking for a 3% credit at closing. I'm just telling you that so that you remember it if it comes up when they make us an offer. I'm not asking you to commit to that right now. Okay? The more preemptive that you can be in your conversations, the easier time you're going to have when you're actually negotiating with them over a contract. Okay. Broker obligations simply says we're going to make diligent and continued efforts to sell the property under the terms of this agreement. Multiple listing service. Wow. You've all been reading the news about what's going on with Compass. And now that Compass has bought Everywhere, which is Caldwell Banker and everyone else, they're literally trying to set up private listing networks. Their spiel to their sellers is, you know what, we're going to take your listing, but we're not putting it in the MLS. We're just going to keep it in-house. And by doing that, we're going to be able to show it to all of our Compass agents all over the country. And the clock doesn't start ticking. So we're not looking at days on market. And if we have to take price reductions, it's not showing up in the MLS, which is all really true. However, do you think that showing the listings to just the rest of the Compass agents out there is better than putting it in the MLS and showing it between the Palm Beach and the Miami boards? You've got a combined 80,000 realtors who are out there working with ready, willing, and able buyers. Our job is to expose your listing to as many people as we possibly can. My job as the real estate professional is to help you understand the importance of pricing your home so that we'll go under contract quickly. We're not having to take price reductions, and it's not going to sit for months on the market. But it's all about exposure and getting you out to as many people as possible. And that's where the argument with Compass falls apart. You have to have those conversations with people. It's your job to protect the public. When you're out at a social event and somebody brings this up, and unfortunately, Gail and I just had a nephew who listed their house with a Compass agent, and they sold him that entire spiel about why they're not putting it in the MLS right away, and it was too late for us to have the conversation with them. You need to start having those types of conversation with people. This is big news in the media. All right. All right. So broker authority, sellers authorizing the broker to market the broker to the public, which means flyers, yard signs, digital marketing on websites, brokers' websites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Public marketing also includes marketing the product to real estate agents outside the broker's office. Once we do that, you have 24 hours to put this in the MLS. Now, you can put it in coming soon steps, which means you're not going to be showing the property, but it gives you the ability to market the property everywhere. Okay. You're going to place appropriate transaction signs on the property. Now, these next couple of boxes you see I wrote in here Do not check, do not initial. Okay. It says use the seller's name in conjunction with marketing the property. Display the property on the internet except the street address. Do you think anybody's going to look at the property anywhere if you don't tell them where it is? Next one is seller just doesn't authorize the broker to put the property on the MLS. That's a true pocket listing. Why would you take a pocket listing when you can't tell anybody about your listing? What do you think your chances are of selling that? So they do not check those boxes. And if you don't check those boxes, they don't initial down here. If they're checking those boxes, it basically says seller understands they're an idiot, but they want to do it anyways. Okay. All right. Number C, obtain information relating to the present mortgage on the property. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, when we go under contract, the title company will need all of your mortgage information. Would it be possible for you to get that together for me now so it's in the file? Mortgage company needs to know what the payoff is going to be. And if they say, well, we own the house free and clear, we paid off the mortgage, fabulous. Do you have your payoff slip so I can show that to the title company and they don't have to worry about it? Okay. D, line 70. I wish they would take that out of the listing agreements already because we don't provide CMAs to potential buyers. That's their agent's job. E, use a lockbox system to show and access the property. Lockbox doesn't ensure the property's security, and please remove or secure all your valuables. Okay. And they're releasing us from any liability because of the lockbox. Now, don't lose a listing because you insist on putting a lockbox and they don't want one. But you ought to understand what the benefit of lockboxes are and why you should be using them. Primary reason for you not to share with your seller is that gives you the ability to control your time. If you're not using a lockbox and you have to show up for every listing appointment, every showing, what do you think your day looks like? If you have more than one listing, you're going to be spending your day running from showing to showing to showing to showing. If you have a super lockbox, you're using showing time, the other agent's showing time, they're setting up the appointment, and you're just getting a phone call saying, John Smith, XYZ Realty is showing your property 2:00 tomorrow. Makes your life easy. The super lockbox is also set up so that as soon as somebody opens it, they're sent a survey asking them what they thought of the property. And that's how you get feedback to give to your seller. It's also verifying exactly when the agent accessed the lockbox and went into the house and when they closed it up and left. So it's a form of security for your seller. Seller who turns to you and says, well, I want you to show my property. I'm hiring you to sell your property, to sell my house. Here's the reality, guys. None of you is good enough to sell a house. Buyer walks in the door, and within the first 5 seconds, they know if they like the house or not. If they like the house, they're going to spend more time there. And if you did your job properly, if you created a flyer, if you put the information into the MLS, it's all there. I want you to think about when you go shopping, doesn't matter what you're shopping for. If you walk into Nordstrom's, how many salespeople are going to walk up to you within the first couple of minutes you're there and go, can I help you? Can I help you find something? What are you looking for? And what's your standard answer? No, just looking. Whether you know what you're looking for or not, just looking. You don't want to have to deal with the sales people. Now, imagine you've got the buyer coming through the house. They have their agent. How comfortable are they talking to each other about the house, about what they think of it, what the features are when you're standing there? You're looked upon as the adversary. If you're not there, they have the freedom to walk around, feel at home, talk about the house as much or as little as they want. To me, those are the reasons for using a lockbox. Try and get your seller to understand that. But like I said, if they want you to show the house, don't lose a listing because of it. Now, line 75, it says, hold on a second, turn that off. 75, withhold verbal offers. Check that box. You'll get people calling you up going, yeah, I've got an investor, have a buyer. They're looking, would your seller take X? I don't know. My seller's instructed me not to take verbal offers. If you want to put it in writing, send it over. Be happy to present it to them. Okay? Verbal offers are not worth the paper they're not written on. You're wasting your time and your seller's time. Check the box. Now, the second one, do not check. That one says withhold all offers once the seller accepts a contract. If you did check that box, you cannot take a backup offer on the property. And you always want the ability for somebody to come along and say, listen, I've got somebody who wants to make an offer on your property. You go, well, we already went to contract on it, but if you want to be a backup, that's great. Now you've got the ability when inspections are done and the buyer's asking for all kinds of credits, you can say, listen, it's as is. We've already got a backup offer in place. Take it as is, or let's move on. It puts you in a position of strength. Okay. Brings up another point that just came up this week with me with another agent. This one is a really silly type of situation. They took a listing, they put it in the MLS as cash and conventional mortgage. The agent sent over the offer as VA. Now, our agent knows that the association does not allow VA loans, so there's no way it's going to go through. The buyer got extremely pissed off, and the buyer's agent started calling and threatening. He never presented the offer to his seller. He made that decision on his own. Well, they put VA, and I said, we're not taking VA, and I know the association's not going to take it. He just told them that without sharing the offer with his seller. You have to at least call your seller and say, listen, I want to let you know I got an offer from so-and-so. The terms on here are not what we were asking for, and it won't work. My ethical duty is I still have to tell you about it. Okay? Don't get caught. You have to show them those offers. Okay? All right, next paragraph. G, virtual office websites. They're what are called VOWs. They literally don't exist anymore. IDX has displaced all of that. Zillow displaced all of that. Redfin was the first company that used VOWs, virtual office websites. As a buyer, if you went to Redfin, and this was 10 years ago, you actually had to sign a digital document that said Redfin was representing you. And to do that, you got kind of open access to search the MLS. Well, you can do that now without having to give away any rights to anybody. That's what it is. However, Zillow, Trulia, they all use the estimated market valuations. And they're always wrong. If any of you have gone online and searched your own home, you know they're not accurate. But everybody goes to Zillow. They want to see what their house is worth. What happens if you check the box, line 83, that says seller does not authorize an automated estimate of market value? Your listing will not upload to any website that has that automated market valuation on it. I would rather have my listings go to those websites with a price that I know doesn't make any sense. So at least buyers are seeing it, and then I have the ability to talk to them and explain to them why it's not correct. Now, do you know how to explain to your sellers why Zillow doesn't work? It's real simple, guys. If you take a blank piece of paper, draw a cross on it, make a little dot, go, this is your house. See, what Zillow does is they will take a circle, draw a circle around your house. And they take every property that's sold within that circle. They take the price per square foot that it sold for, and they multiply that times the square footage of your house. It's not real accurate, is it? See, because while your neighborhood is a $500,000 neighborhood, within that circle might be a neighborhood of homes that are $1 million plus, might be a neighborhood of townhomes. Those are included in that circle, which throws off all of their data. Even if the circle was totally within that community, do you realize that same floor plan, identical square footage, one house has a pool, the other one doesn't? That accepts the value of the house, doesn't it? Yeah. Changes the price per square foot. If one of the houses backs up to a main road and the other one is in a nice interior lot, Zillow's not picking that up. That's what you do as a real estate professional. You need to understand it, because when you go on a listing appointment, and if you remember back, I told you, you get a phone call, first thing you do is go and you pull the tax records. The second thing I want you to do is go to Zillow, plug in the address, and see what Zillow has to say about it. Reason I'm advising you to do that, it's a totally different listing appointment if Zillow says the house should be $650,000 and you think it should be $600,000. Then if you think it should be $600,000, but Zillow is saying $550,000, right? They're believing what they see in the internet instead of you with all the data and the information right in front of you. And you need to know how to use that data to talk to them about how to price it properly. Okay? Now, the next box, with line 85, I say check that box. It says seller does not authorize third parties to write comments or reviews. I call this Yelp or Open Table for real estate. And I know that most of you have decided not to go to a restaurant because you read the reviews on it, and there were one or two people that had nasty reviews. Even if everybody else was great reviews, you read the negative ones. Well, do you want somebody not going to your listing because they saw a negative review that somebody else left? So check that box. Don't let anybody write reviews. Okay, seller's obligations. They're going to cooperate with us. They're going to recognize that we have MLS obligations that we have to comply with. They're going to provide us with keys to make the property accessible for showing. And very important, Mr. Seller, if you rent your property, take another mortgage on the property, take a loan on the property, otherwise encumber, please let me know, because that affects our ability to sell your house. They're indemnifying us, holding us harmless for losses, damages, etc., because seller's negligence, representations, misrepresentations, actions or inactions. All that means, Mr. Seller, is if somebody's walking up to your front door and they trip on your broken sidewalk, that's you that they're suing, not me. However, understand most people will sue realtors because they know we have insurance, but you're indemnifying us on that. If you outright misrepresent something, in other words, if you say, well, that vacant lot behind me, that's going to stay vacant forever, and it turns out that it's zoned to have a water treatment plant built on it, the buyer might very well sue you for that. That was your comment, wasn't mine. Just be aware of that. Number two, the use of a lockbox. We talked about that. Number three, the existence of undisclosed material facts about the property. We're going to get there in just a second. F, there are certain buyers and sellers that have to deal with FIRPTA. If that comes up at closing, you're agreeing to sign any documents dealing with FIRPTA. G is about the seller's disclosure. Okay? Seller's disclosure is the second most important document we're going to be signing today. That's what gives you the opportunity to tell a potential buyer everything that you know about your home. The reason that this is important is because the more you share with somebody, the less likelihood they have of coming back and suing you, saying, you didn't tell me that. As an example, if every time there's a really hard rain, you see the wall under your living room window gets wet, but we're in dry season now, so you don't think about it, and you don't disclose that, buyer moves in, they get a heavy rain, that wall has mold in it, they're going to come back and sue you for that. If there was a roof leak that you patched, disclose it. Because if there's an issue with it again, and somebody goes up into the attic and says, well, there's evidence of leaks up here, you're just opening yourself up to be sued. You understand the importance of a seller's disclosure. It's not to give the buyer the opportunity to knock down the price of your house. It's to cut off the buyer from potentially suing you for non-disclosed information. I also want you to understand that as a realtor, you have an ethical duty to disclose what you know, even if the seller doesn't. You're walking through the house and you notice a stain on the ceiling, which you should be looking around. You're going to go, Mr. Seller, can you tell me what's going on here? Yeah, we had a leak before. I patched it, took care of it, and don't worry about it. I'll spray some Kills on the ceiling. You'll never know. Well, if they didn't put it on the seller's disclosure, you need to disclose it. If they didn't disclose that empty lot down the street is zoned to be a water treatment plant or zoned to be an industrial building or a commercial, anything, and they didn't disclose it, you have to. You're held to a higher standard. You need to understand how to tell if a garage conversion was done with or without permits. If they tell you that the water heater is only 2 years old, did you pull permits for that? Same thing with the air conditioner. If they replaced the air conditioner, did you pull permits for it? If they didn't, it has to be disclosed. Okay? Questions about any of that? That's a whole lot of information there. Okay. And the last one is also important. Consult with appropriate professionals. if you have legal, tax, property condition, environmental, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a real estate professional. If you have questions regarding anything else, search out information for a professional. If you don't know somebody, ask, and I'll get you the name of somebody good to use. Okay. Compensation. Right? A is the line you should be using. Your commission is a percentage of the total purchase price plus whatever you want to charge as a transaction fee. So if you're charging 3% plus $4.95 transaction fee, that's where it goes. Okay. B, we do not do options. And C, you only use if it's an investment property and they're telling you, I don't care if you sell it or lease it, whatever comes first. What you want to do is put 10% of the gross lease value. So you've now covered yourself for getting paid whether they sell it or lease it. Okay. Now, broker's fee is due in any of the following circumstances. If any interest in the property is transferred, whether by sale, lease, exchange, governmental action, bankruptcy, or any other means of transfer, regardless of whether the buyer is secured by the seller, the broker, or any other person. We get paid when the property sells. Now, if your seller happens to be attorney, God bless you, they are the worst. Or if they have an attorney look at the listing agreement, you are probably going to get some of this crossed out. If they cross out exchange, governmental action, or bankruptcy, I don't have a problem because we're not getting paid under those circumstances. However, a lot of attorneys are going to try and cross out that entire line altogether. If they do, I will not accept it because that takes away our right to get paid. So if you have somebody who literally tries to cross out anything on a listing agreement, guys, I need you to send it to me. Scan it, send it to me, and we'll talk about it. There are certain things I'll accept, certain things we won't. Okay? Now, next one, 2. If seller refuses or fails to sign an offer at the price and terms stated in this agreement. And I'm sorry, but that's a bunch of crap. Seller has the right to not sign a contract for any reason at all, other than fair housing. Seller says, well, what does this mean? Well, quite honestly, buyer can walk in and offer you full price. You pick the closing date. We're taking it as is. We're waiving inspections. There's no reason for the seller to say no. The seller can still say no. I don't like the way he came in and he kicked my dog and dragged mud on my kitchen floor or how he spoke to my wife. I don't care what he offers me. I'm not selling him my house. He's got that right. We don't collect a commission on it. We collect a commission when we get paid. Now, the second part of that sentence is more important. It says, or agrees with a buyer to cancel an executed sales contract. Seller calls you up and says, well, you know what? We've been out looking for where we want to move to. We can't find anything. We need to cancel this contract. Mr. Seller, I understand you're feeling very nervous. Be empathetic with them. I understand you're feeling very nervous. However, what you are wanting to do is to break a legally binding contract. I strongly suggest you speak to an attorney. You also have to be aware that my broker does have the right to collect the commission due on this. Okay? So the two parts of it is be empathetic and send them to an attorney. And again, if you don't have somebody that you would recommend, let me know. I'll get you in touch with a good attorney who can advise you. If that ever happens, guys, call me immediately. We'll talk about it. I'll be there to walk you through it, try and help you save the contract, and if not, make sure that we're at least protected. Okay? Number 3 says, if within 90 days of the termination date, the seller transfers or contracts to transfer the property to somebody who we or any other broker showed the property to, we're entitled to a commission. All this means, Mr. Seller, unfortunately, there have been cases in the past where it's getting towards the end of the listing period. The buyer and the seller get together and go, hey, you know what? My listing expires in 30 days. Why don't you come back then? We'll go to contract and we can save the commission. Well, if any of the brokers find out about that, they will come back and sue the seller for their commission. However, no fee will be due the broker if property is relisted after the termination date. So guys, your listing expires today. The buyer that came to see the house yesterday comes back tomorrow and goes to contract. The new agent that has that listing is the one who gets paid, not you. Okay. Retained deposits. Put a 0 in there. This is one of the places that you are going to show your value to the sellers. You see, Mr. Seller, most every other realtor that I know out there puts 50% in there. That means that if a buyer defaults on the contract, and let's say there's $10,000 in escrow, it means you get $5,000 and the other broker gets $5,000. I don't believe that's right. See, we get paid when we close on your house, not before then. You're the one that had the mortgage payment, the insurance, the taxes, cost of maintenance. You deserve that escrow if there's a default. If it does happen, there's only one thing I'd ask you to do, please. Tell your family, friends, and coworkers how I am always looking after the best interest of my clients. You see, the repeats and referral is worth way more than what you'll get from trying to collect part of an escrow dispute. Okay. And this is telling sellers that buyer's broker, even after being compensated by the seller or broker, are providing services for the buyer. They may collect money from that buyer. They're going to enter into a separate agreement with that buyer. None of that has anything to do with us. They're there representing the buyer. I'm here representing you. Now, paragraph B, seller authorizes broker to offer compensation to buyer's broker from the seller in the amount of 3%. You get paid 3% up here on line 110. The buyer's broker gets whatever the seller decides to pay them on line 150. Could be 3%, could be 2.5%, could be 2%, whatever you're discussing. Guys, as the listing agents, this puts you in control. We have more agents that are making more money now than they ever have because they're able to protect they're 3% up here. They're protecting what they feel they're worth, which may or may not be the same that they're paying out to a buyer's broker. Okay, so you've got 8A and 10B. I just want you to be aware. They might come back with the broker-to-broker compensation agreement. You do not want to accept that. They need to give you the seller to buyer broker compensation agreement, right? We're only collecting our percentage up here. We're not collecting let's say a 6% commission, whatever it is up here where we can pay out to the buyer's broker. We're only collecting our commission. You've got to be very specific that it's the seller that's paying the buyer's broker. Well, you look confused. You okay with that? Good. Okay. And then I made a note here about 10B is the commission the seller's paying to the buyer broker. 8A is just the commission being paid to Keller Williams. Okay, agency. Now I'm going to preface this, guys. I want you to understand this. I want you to internalize this because this should actually be part of your listing presentation before you ever get to the listing agreement. Okay, this is the conversation that I want you to have with them about how you work. You see, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I believe in being a fiduciary to my client. That means that my client comes first. My client's interests are before mine in all cases. That's the same way that an attorney represents you, an accountant, your doctor, and if you have a good stockbroker, most of your good stockbrokers are also single agents. They're fiduciaries. What does that mean? Well, it means that I have to deal with everybody honestly and fairly. But as a fiduciary, I owe you loyalty, confidentiality, obedience, and full disclosure. I'm loyal to you and you alone. I'm representing you and all of your interests. Anything that you share with me stays with me. Give you two extreme cases for that example. Sellers are getting divorced. No one will ever find that out from me. Stays with me because that affects your ability to negotiate. And I actually had a case a number of years ago. An agent, before agency was an issue, an agent came in and told the entire offer, listen, my seller has a terminal illness. He's not going to be here for that much longer. He'll accept anything. Bring me offers. Anything that I know that you're sharing with me or I learn of a confidential nature stays with me. Even after we close the transaction, that stays with me. Obedience, that means I'm following your directions. If I think we should have open houses and you're saying I don't want an open house, I have to listen to you. If in 30 days from now, I'm coming to you and talking to you about price reductions and you're saying, no, I'm sticking with what it is, I have to follow you. That's obedience. And full disclosure, that means anything that I find out from the buyer or from the other agent, I have to share that with you. For example, if I find out that the buyer has been relocated, that they're moving down here for a job transfer, and he's got to be at work next month, I'm going to let you know because that affects our negotiating ability. If they have to register their kids In this school district, I'm going to share that with you. That's what creates a single agent. Now, what I want you to understand, 95% of all the realtors out there operate as transaction brokers. They represent the transaction, not their client. Okay? Kai's will not let their agents be single agents. Coldwell Banker, all of your big companies will not allow single agency. They only allow transaction brokerage. There's a handful of brokers like myself, all Keller Williams agents. I know one small boutique brokerage that also only single agency, because that's our belief. That's how we should be looking after our customers. You understand why I want to see you make this part of your listing presentation? If you never get to this part, they're interviewing a couple of other agents. You've now set yourself up here. And one of the questions they should be asking the other agents they're interviewing is, tell me about, are you a single agent? No, I'm a transaction broker. I'm going to look after you, but my broker only allows us to be transaction brokers. We can't be a fiduciary. My belief is that's a selling point for you that will tilt the scales in your favor of earning that listing over everybody else. Make it about other people, not about you. Okay? Now, they're going to sign down here accepting the fact you're a single agent. And built right in here is the consent to transition to transaction brokerage. And again, you see it's the name of your office. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this comes up if either I directly or any agent in my office was to bring the buyer to your home. My broker needs to transition where he's now representing the transaction, not representing either party. We're acting as the middleman in order to move things forward, get things done. In reality, while my broker is doing that, I'm representing you the way that we talked about, and the other agent is representing the buyer the way they talked about. My broker is the one that had to transition to the transaction brokerage. You see the difference of the technicality versus the reality? And they're signing here so that they're agreeing to that at the same time. All right, conditional termination. At the seller's request, broker may conditionally terminate this agreement. They would agree to pay a withdrawal fee and reimburse us for all direct expenses incurred marketing the property. Guys, I recommend putting 0 in there. I look at it as that's my cost of doing business. If they're legitimately changing their mind and cannot sell, my job transfer fell through, I'm not moving. We've been looking for other houses and we can't find what we want in our price range. We just want to take this house off the market. Okay? Now, that being said, guys, there are agents in our offices that will put $1,000 in there. You cancel the listing agreement, you owe me $1,000. It covers my costs for taking the photographs and making brochures and the time I put into it. Again, here's the way I'm looking at it. Repeats and referrals are worth a whole lot more than trying to go after a minimal amount of money. If you charge them anything to cancel their listing, do you think they're ever going to call you to come back when they're ready to sell the house again? No. We get paid when we sell their house. Be satisfied with that. Do your best job possible. Make this a win for your clients. Now, the broker may void the conditional termination if they turn around and sell the property to somebody. So if they were being dishonest right up front and told us that circumstances changed, they want to take the house off the market, and we find out afterwards that they sold the house to somebody, we definitely have the right to go after and sue them for our commission. Okay. Dispute resolution. I want you to see I wrote to the side, do not initial. So again, this paragraph is saying if the seller initials it, I have to initial it, you initial it, is saying that everybody agrees to go to binding arbitration. Binding arbitration, in my opinion, is a win-lose scenario. You're going in front of some judge wannabe who's going to make a ruling that one party wins and one party loses, and there is no appeal to arbitration. If you don't agree to arbitrate, you have the right to sue each other immediately. However, before you get to sue each other, you go to mediation, where both parties explains their sides, and maybe you get to work things out to a mutually benefit agreement. There are a lot of attorneys out there that when they review the listing agreement, they're going to cross out this entire paragraph. Let them. By crossing out the entire paragraph, they're basically saying, we just want to go to court right away. Let them. It's okay. The last paragraph, miscellaneous. The agreement is binding on sellers and brokers, heirs, representatives, administrators, successors. That means if you have a seller who passes away, you still have a binding listing agreement. Their estate is bound by the listing agreement and by the terms of the listing agreement. They can't come in and say, well, we want to cancel this because my best friend is a realtor and that's who I want to use. All right. We have a listing agreement with the estate, and we've got to abide by the terms of it. Okay? It's also saying that electronic signatures are legal. You know, there are no prior agreements, representations exist out there. Just basic legal stuff. Additional terms. Anything that you and the seller talked about that was specific to this agreement gets written in here. So I'm going to pick out Lola. If you said to the seller, well, you know what, if I bring the buyer to your house, total commission will be 4%. Okay. You're going to write in here, if Lola Clark represents both buyer and seller, total commission will be 4%. You make it specific to you. You don't want to include the entire brokerage so that you're going to be hurting one of the other agents in the office if that happens. Okay? I've also talked in the past how I believe that Title Alliance is the best title company that I've worked with. In Broward and Dade County, it is typical that the buyer picks and pays for title. However, there's nothing wrong with you having a conversation with the seller ahead of time and saying, you know what, we have an in-house title company. These guys are phenomenal. I would recommend that this is who we use for the closing. So you would write in here, seller instructs broker that Title Alliance shall handle the closing. Buyer's broker sends over an offer, which they've checked the box, and it would be either B or C, the Miami-Dade provisions, that the buyer's picking the title company. And as part of the negotiations, you get to go back and say, well, my seller has already told me that they would like Title Alliance to handle the closing. So it becomes part of your counter offer. The reason I like that so much is it gives you the ability to walk into the office anytime that they're there. Call them anytime, day or night on the phone. Ask them questions about what's going on with the transaction, and you'll get an answer. The problem with most other title companies, they make it impossible for you to find out what's going on. You're having to go through the other agent who's calling them to communicate with you, and you never get the information you want. If you can control the situation, you're going to be way ahead of the game with this. And in Palm Beach County, if you're dealing with the transaction in Palm Beach, the seller gets to pick the title company. Have the conversation right up front with them. So you can start communicating with title even before you have a contract on it, so that the title company can do a preliminary lien search, see if there might be any problems that you need to know about before you go to contract. So the same thing, seller instructs broker that Title Alliance will handle the closing of the property. Okay. So anything else that you have in here, if you want to talk to them about home warranties, there's a document about home warranties. This was just reiterated to me the other day. One of our agents had to file an E&O claim. If that agent had talked to the buyer about home warranties, home warranty underwrites the deductible amount for E&O insurance. We have to become better at offering, or at least having the conversation about home warranty policies. Okay. So, guys, last page. Fill in all the information. I am always puzzled when I get these forms back to look over. They've had the seller sign it. Phone numbers are blank, email addresses blank, addresses blank. Guys, you know all this information. Fill it in. Same thing with the broker or authorized sales associate. It's your name, but it's the office phone number, office address, so that your seller, if they can't reach you, at least they know how to reach out to somebody at the office when they need something. Okay. And then the very last line on here, do you notice it's in a black box? It's the only thing on the listing agreement that's in a black box. Those of you that are new out of real estate school, you might remember contracts are not enforceable unless they are signed by all parties and returned. It doesn't matter if this was done in DocuSign, where they're digitally signing everything. You still need to fill in that last box. Now, I advise you, if you're having them sign it digitally, fill in that box with the date that you're sending it to them. Most people are signing things the same day you send it to them. They're not waiting a couple of days. And DocuSign timestamps everything. But the point is, fill in that box. That's your guarantee that you're going to get paid. There's not going to be a fight of somebody saying, well, you never returned me the listing agreement. Well, no, as a matter of fact, it states right here that the copy was returned to you on such and such a date. Okay. That's the listing agreement, guys. That's all the technicalities about it. Some of my thoughts, how you should be conducting business. Anybody have any questions that I can go over for you before we end the call?
I have a question.
Okay.
Thank you so much for this. I've learned so much, so I really appreciate it. When I review this video later on, I would like to print the listing agreement, the same one, so that I could take notes on it. Where can I find it?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking. Um, every office does have it loaded somewhere, but
Okay.
every office is a little bit different. So, two suggestions for you. Your front desk person
Okay.
would probably know where it is. If not, Miko, who is our IT person and comes into every office 1 day a week, knows exactly where all of this is stored.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question
Any-
too.
Go.
Hi. This
Thank you for laughing at all my corny jokes, by the
You're welcome. They were funny.
way.
This copy that you have on here right now with the notes, do we have access to that or no?
That's what I was just answering. This
Oh, okay,
is
okay.
every office has a copy of
That's this
this.
one. Okay.
Just inquire with either Miko or front desk as to where it is.
Great. Thanks, Richard.
Okay. All right, guys, go have an awesome day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.